She was just a waitress refilling water glasses at a private gala until the guest of honor stepped in. The room hushed. Her hands trembled, because the man everyone applauded was the same man who'd once vanished without a word, and left her with a child no one knew about. But he didn't recognize her. Or maybe he did. If you've ever wondered what it takes to stand in front of someone who once walked away from everything, stay with this story, and if it moves something in you, feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a thought behind. Seattle's mornings had their own rhythm, quiet at first, then full throttle by 7 a.m. At Maple and Pine Cafe, the pace picked up fast, especially on a Monday. Emily Rivera moved quickly between tables, dodging briefcases and laptops, refilling cups of black coffee for men who barely looked up. Her white blouse clung to her back from the steam and the strain, but she didn't mind the heat. What she minded was the way they looked through her, like she was just part of the furniture. The VIP silent zone was a corner booth by the wide glass windows, reserved for high-profile clients who preferred discretion. Emily rarely served that section. Today, though, her co-worker Janine called in sick, and the manager had asked her to cover. She didn't argue. She never did. At 7:42 a.m., as she carried a tray of espresso and lemon water to that corner, she looked up and everything stopped. There, seated calmly in a tailored navy suit, was Daniel Whitmore. His face hadn't changed much. Maybe the jaw was more defined, the hair swept back with less effort, the lines around the eyes a little deeper. But it was him. Same posture, same stillness. The same man who vanished 12 years ago, leaving behind a college dorm, a torn page from a notebook, and a girl who hadn't yet missed her period. Emily stood there too long. Daniel didn't notice. He glanced up when she approached, nodded with polite distance, and returned to his screen. No flicker of recognition, no shift in the jawline or pause in breath. He took the glass of water without meeting her eyes. She placed it on the table. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said quietly. His response was a non-committal, "Thank you." She turned and walked back toward the counter, each step slower than the last. Behind her eyes, a wave of anger began to stir, not because he looked good, not because he sat there like nothing had happened, but because he had the nerve not to remember. Or worse, he remembered and chose not to. 12 years, a child, a life rebuilt in silence. And he sipped his espresso like he'd never made her cry into a pillow in a college dorm 3 towns away. Emily busied herself the rest of the morning, but her hands moved with a twitch she couldn't shake. She heard his voice once more when he ordered a second espresso, clipped and neutral, just like the men he probably worked with now. He paid in cash, left no tip, but placed a card on the saucer before leaving. Whitmore Legacy Foundation. She didn't need to read the name on the card. She knew it. It had been on the building she passed every day on her way to pick up Noah from school. It had been in the footer of every local news article about urban housing reform and financial restructuring. It had been on the envelope she once considered opening, until she recognized the logo and tossed it in the trash. She picked up the card after his chair scraped back and the door chimed his exit. For a moment, she considered tearing it. Then she slid it into her apron, next to the pen she used to write Noah's lunch notes. By noon, the cafe filled with another wave of customers. Emily kept her head down, but her thoughts couldn't keep still. Daniel Whitmore was back in Seattle, and he'd walked into her world like it was his own. Outside, the clouds parted just enough to let a slice of sun in through the window. It hit the edge of the booth where he'd sat. The glass still bore a faint print of his fingers. She didn't wipe it away, but she did stand there, looking at it a little longer than she meant to. The apartment in West Seattle was never entirely quiet. The creaking of floorboards, the hum from the old refrigerator, the occasional thud of Noah's sneakers against the hallway wall. It was all part of a life Emily had built from the ground up. That morning, the sunlight hit the corner of the kitchen just right, warming the tile as she sliced an apple with slow, steady hands. Noah sat at the breakfast table, elbows on the wood, sketchpad in front of him. "Mom," he said, not looking up, "do you think I got my nose from you or from Dad?" Emily glanced over, the knife stopping just short of the core. I think your nose is all yours. He drew a circle with extra lines. I think Dad was good at drawing, right? That's why I am... She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe, she said. After Noah left for school, she opened the drawer by the sink and slipped the card inside, the one with Daniel's name. She shut the drawer fast, like it might burn through the wood if left open too long. She had work at 3, plenty of time to clean, to fold laundry, to not think about what Daniel's face looked like in the sunlight. But her hands kept pausing at the sink, at the laundry basket, by the window. That face was burned in her memory. And still, it shocked her, the exactness of it, the sharpness of the moment when she realized he hadn't changed much. The part that unsettled her most was how little it had taken for it all to come back. Across the city, Daniel sat in his office high above the Seattle skyline, glass walls, leather chairs, and the hush of success. But his mind wasn't on the quarterly report. It wasn't even on the conference call he had muted 15 minutes ago. It was on the receipt, Emily R. He turned the receipt over. There was nothing else on it, no message, no handwriting, just a printed name. It might have been a coincidence, could have been anyone, but it wasn't. He remembered a girl with paint on her jeans, who carried coffee and conviction in equal parts. Her voice had once been the only thing that calmed him after his father's long silences. He hadn't thought of her in years, not directly. But there had always been this empty space in his timeline, a missing link between who he was and who he had to become. He called his assistant. Find out who handles community events at Maple and Pine Cafe. We're moving the foundation's public meet and greet there next week. She paused. Isn't that a little small for just do it, he said, then hung up. Back in West Seattle. Emily checked her email during her break. The subject line from her manager made her pulse quicken. VIP event, next Thursday. Your primary staff. She didn't need to open it to know what it meant. Later that evening, as she folded Noah's sweatshirts, he brought his sketchbook over and held it up. This is me and you, he said, pointing to a stick figure with curly hair and another holding a frying pan. And who's that? She asked. That's Dad, he said, tapping a third figure wearing a red cape and a hat. I made up what he looks like? Emily nodded, holding the drawing close. Looks like a good man. He's brave, Noah said, and he knows everything, even math. She kissed the top of his head, then tucked the paper under a stack of bills on the counter. That night, after Noah was in bed, she poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out into the street below. The card was still in the drawer. She didn't take it out, but she knew it was there, and it changed the way the room felt. Just its presence made the air a little heavier. She turned off the light, the card untouched, but her sleep, that night, was anything but still. The cafe smelled of fresh lemon oil and wood polish. For once, the chatter of early commuters was replaced by the low hum of production teams and floral arrangements being shifted from one side of the room to the other. Maple and Pine had never looked more curated. Tablecloths covered the normally bare tables, and spotlights had been brought in to highlight a temporary podium near the windows. Outside, a branded black van from the Whitmore Legacy Foundation was parked by the curb, its logo catching the morning light. Emily moved behind the counter like she always had, efficient, silent, invisible, but she could feel the tension clinging to the air, wrapping around her wrists like damp string. She hadn't expected Daniel to actually show up. CEOs often delegated these types of events. Yet, when he walked in, tailored and calm, adjusting his cuffs like he belonged anywhere he stepped, something in her ribcage shifted. His presence stirred both memory and warning. She couldn't read him then, and she still couldn't now. Daniel scanned the room, nodding politely to the staff, when his eyes met hers. It was different this time. A half-second pause, a tilt of the head, faint recognition flickering like a candle in the dark. Emily raised her chin slightly, daring him to ask. He didn't. Later, as she poured wine for the early arriving donors. Daniel approached the bar. She didn't flinch, didn't break stride. She placed a glass in front of him, careful not to meet his gaze. He took it slowly. "Haven't we met before?" he asked. She wiped the counter with a dry towel, maybe in someone's dream. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Not mine. Unfortunately, I'd remember." There was a pause too long to be casual, too short to be revealing. Then someone called his name from the back, and the moment broke. The rest of the event passed in fragments. Speeches, handshakes, posed photos in front of banners. But between all of that, small things happened. Emily adjusting the projector stand when it leaned too far left. Daniel stepping in, one hand on the frame to steady it. Their hands almost touched. She said thank you without looking. He said nothing but didn't move away. Around 2 p.m. Emily stepped out to the sidewalk for air. The city traffic buzzed steadily, and the early autumn wind carried the smell of roasted nuts from a food cart nearby. She stood still, arms crossed, thinking maybe she'd imagined the entire morning. Behind her, the glass door opened. Footsteps. She turned slowly. Daniel stood there, sleeves rolled halfway, holding a clipboard. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was softer than earlier. "How long have you worked here?" 10 years, she said. He looked up. "Seattle's not an easy place to stay in." "It isn't." Her eyes narrowed. "Especially when you've been left behind in it." He didn't react right away, just nodded once. That's fair. There was something about how he said it, not defensive, not deflective, just absorbed. Later, as the event wrapped, and Daniel gave his final handshake to a city council member, he turned briefly toward the bar. Emily stood cleaning a wine glass. Their eyes met again, and this time, neither of them looked away. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, Noah asleep down the hall, and tried to sketch something for the first time in months. Her pencil hovered above the paper, but all she could see in her mind was the moment he steadied the projector. The glass hadn't slipped, but she had. The engine idled beneath him, but Daniel didn't move. The Range Rover sat parked at the edge of the maple and pine lot, hidden behind a slender line of cedar trees that half concealed the cafe's back entrance. His phone, still glowing in his palm, displayed a blurry photo from a college scholarship archive, Emily Rivera, freshman applicant, 2012. A few lines beneath the photo listed her major visual arts and a statement about her dream of starting art therapy programs for children from single-parent homes. Daniel blinked. He remembered a girl who always smelled like turpentine and citrus soap, who hummed while sketching, lips pressed tight in concentration, who once painted a mural outside his dorm room without permission, then laughed when campus security made her scrub it off, that Emily had vanished the same month his father died. Margaret hadn't explained why she pulled him out of school so fast. Only that family came first, that distractions needed to be cut clean, and that girls like Emily didn't understand what legacy meant. He exhaled through his teeth, leaned back, and let the screen go black. Across the city, Emily wiped down the coffee bar with quick, practiced strokes. The rush from the foundation event had passed, but her nerves hadn't. She kept replaying Daniel's voice, the odd catch in it when he said she looked familiar. He didn't know. That much was clear, or he was pretending so well she couldn't tell. Either way, it left her throat tight. Her phone buzzed against the counter. She glanced at the screen and picked up. "Mom," Noah said, "I finished the picture for my art class. It's you and me on the bench outside the library." I added Dad too. Emily paused. "You added Dad?" "Yeah. But since I don't know his face, I made him a superhero, like cape and sunglasses. I think he'd look like that." She swallowed, trying to sound even. "I bet he would." When the call ended, she stood still for a long time, one hand gripping the towel. She didn't tell Noah about Daniel, not because she was ashamed or angry, but because she didn't know how. The truth wasn't simple. It never had been. Daniel had disappeared, yes, but not with malice. He vanished like a building swallowed by fog, too fast, too silent. And she had survived the only way she knew how alone. At that moment, Daniel sat staring at his dashboard, heart racing in a way he didn't expect. Emily's name wasn't just a name. It came with a decade of silence, a missing piece in a life carefully managed. He'd always believed she'd chosen to disappear, or worse, that she'd outgrown what they had. He had accepted that, tucked it away. But that last look in her eyes told a different story. And her voice, calm but edged, had held something he couldn't shake. Regret, maybe, or a wound reopened too soon. He tapped his thumb on the steering wheel. Then, with a jolt of instinct he didn't fully understand, he opened his notes app and typed Emily Rivera, WS University, freshman year, mural by the library, lost contact after March 2012. Father died February. Margaret intervened. Missing months. He stared at the screen. Then, he deleted the word missing. That night, Emily found Noah asleep on the living room floor, curled beside his sketchbook. She lifted it gently and flipped through the pages. On the last one, she saw the drawing he described: a smiling boy, a woman with curls, and a tall figure floating above them with a red cape and dark glasses. Across the top, he'd written, "Maybe this is what dads look like." She ran a finger along the crayon lines, her throat tight. Daniel, miles away, stood alone in his kitchen. He held an old college journal in one hand, the cover stiff from age. Tucked inside was a faded ticket stub from a student art show. He turned it over. On the back, in her handwriting, "Don't forget to live, even when they tell you how to survive." He set it down slowly, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure who had disappeared from whom. The third time Daniel walked into Maple and Pine that week, the host didn't bother offering a menu. He simply nodded toward the corner booth, the one Daniel had claimed without meaning to. Daniel slid in with a cup of chamomile tea and opened a tablet he had no intention of reading. He looked out the window more than he looked at the screen. Something about the morning light bouncing off the countertop. Something about the smell of steamed milk and old wood. Something that slowed him down. Emily didn't approach right away. She passed by his table a few times, took orders, wiped down counters. But eventually, when she returned with a fresh teapot, their eyes met, and the silence between them didn't feel like silence anymore. It felt like something stretching. "You went to Washington State," she said casually, almost as if she were asking the air. Daniel looked up. "Yeah, didn't finish. Why my father passed away my sophomore year. My mother pulled me out." He paused, said I had to take over. Emily nodded. Her expression didn't shift. That must have been hard. It was sudden. Daniel admitted. Everything else just stopped. Emily set the pot down. That's how things end sometimes. Not loud. Just all at once. They didn't talk again for 10 minutes. Daniel scrolled through empty pages. Emily took another table's order. When she came back to refill his cup, she placed a small square of napkin next to the teapot, folded neatly, like a secret note. He opened it with curiosity. Drawn in blue ink was the silhouette of a boy with a cape. His arms were stretched above his head, flying past clouds, and next to him was a handwritten line, "If I had a dad, I'd fly with him." Daniel stared at it. "Who drew this?" he asked. Emily was already turning away, but answered softly, "My son." Daniel blinked. "How old, 11?" He tried to speak again, but the words caught behind his teeth. The napkin sat in front of him for a long time. He didn't fold it, didn't tuck it away, just looked at it like it might explain something he didn't know he'd forgotten. There was no accusation in the gesture, just quiet truth. That night, Daniel stood in his office, lights low, shelves shadowed. He'd told himself he wouldn't let the past interfere, that whatever had happened between him and Emily had been closed. But the napkin said otherwise. The way she spoke, unflinching, but not cruel, said otherwise. He drove to Whitmore Enterprises headquarters well past business hours. The executive wing was mostly dark, but Margaret Whitmore's light was still on. glowing softly through the frosted glass of her office door. Daniel hesitated at the threshold. Inside, Margaret was standing beside her old credenza, holding a box in both hands. She was placing old letters into a file drawer. Not business correspondence, these were personal. Some envelopes were weathered, ink blurred at the edges, tied in twine like something meant to be hidden, not remembered. Daniel didn't knock. He didn't step forward either. He stood still, watching his mother fold away things he'd never known she'd kept. She didn't see him. He backed away, slowly, pulling the door until it latched without sound. Then he walked to the elevator, one hand pressed to his chest, as if holding something inside. Emily, back at her apartment, found Noah asleep on the living room carpet again, surrounded by crayons and toy pieces. She gathered his things, tucked a blanket over him, and noticed the drawing he'd left half-finished. This one was different, less fantastical. It showed 3 people standing in front of what looked like a bench at a park. One adult held a book, one held the boy's hand. Underneath, in careful block letters, he had written, "Family, maybe someday." Emily sat down on the couch, folded her legs beneath her, and stared at the drawing until the lines blurred, at the Whitmore Tower. Daniel stepped out into the garage and leaned against his car. The city was hushed. But inside him, noise was starting to rise, questions he had buried, possibilities he had never dared imagine. He looked up toward the top-floor window of his mother's office, still faintly lit, and for the first time, he wondered what else had been quietly put away, never meant for him to see. The morning arrived gray, but the cafe felt warmer than usual. The tall windows at Maple and Pine let in just enough light to soften the wood tones, and the smell of cinnamon from the back kitchen drifted to the front like a quiet welcome. Daniel showed up without a suit, no driver, no phone in hand, just khakis, a rolled-up button-down, and that faint wrinkle between his brows that meant he was trying. Emily had already rearranged the front display for the upcoming children's art event sponsored by the Whitmore Foundation. It wasn't supposed to be a big production, just a few easels, some hanging threads, a bulletin board for crayons and cards. But for some reason, Daniel showed up early, sleeves already pushed to his elbows, asking where the tape was. "I'm not used to being told what to do," he said, balancing one of the poster boards. "But I think I'm better when someone else is in charge." Emily handed him a roll of painter's tape without looking up. "Don't flatter yourself. I'm only bossy when there's hot glue involved." He smirked. She didn't return it, not entirely, but the corners of her mouth curved just enough. They worked in tandem for the next hour. No schedule, no plan, just tape and wire and shared space. She watched him try, fumble, adjust, saw his hands struggle with a stapler too old for its job, and for the first time in 12 years. Emily laughed, not politely, but with a sound that made her cover her mouth like it surprised her. "You never could work a stapler," she said. Daniel paused. "That memory feels like a lifetime ago." "Because it is," she answered, but softer now. Mid-morning, while sorting through supply bins in the storage cabinet, Emily reached for an old file tucked deep in the corner. A manila folder tumbled forward, and from it slid a photograph faded slightly at the edges, but clear enough. She froze. It was them, taken in their sophomore year at Washington State, standing under the oak tree behind the Fine Arts Building, her hand in his, both smiling like people who believed time couldn't touch them. It had never been framed, never mailed, just folded into her notebooks over the years until it landed here. She picked it up, thumb brushing the bottom corner. Daniel had stepped over to hand her a zip tie when he saw it. The moment their eyes met, something inside him stilled. You kept that Emily didn't meet his gaze. Not for me, for my son, so he could see who his father was before I forgot myself. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. The hum of the cafe faded. For a second, it felt like they were back under that tree, only the bark had weathered and the roots had twisted deeper. "Emily," he started. "I don't want an apology," she interrupted, voice quiet but firm. "Not yet, maybe not ever." He nodded. Once. Respectfully. Gratefully. The kind of nod you give when you realize the past isn't yours to reclaim. It's just something you're allowed to walk beside if someone lets you. That evening, after he left, Emily found the photograph again on the prep table. Daniel hadn't taken it. She considered putting it away again, but something stopped her. Instead, she clipped it to the wall behind the register, between a child's drawing of a rainbow and a note that read, "Thank you for the warm milk. Jordan, age 5. Daniel, alone in his apartment, drafted an email to the foundation's PR team, to the donors, to the hotel liaison. He deleted most of it before sending. The final line read, "Cancel the Westin Gala. We're moving it to Maple and Pine, because that place feels like the truth." He hit send. Then he stared at his inbox, like it might answer the question he hadn't asked out loud yet. The question about what it meant to want back something that was never officially lost, but had waited, quietly, all the same. The scent of espresso lingered behind the clatter of ceramic mugs as Maple and Pine prepared for another full day. But the weight in the air wasn't from steam or heat, it was from conversation. Low tones exchanged behind the prep counter. Quick glances toward the windows when Daniel's black SUV slowed along the curb. Customers who used to tip well now left in silence. A couple of them didn't come back at all. Emily noticed it all. The regular with the law books had moved to the cafe down the block. The retired nurse who always asked for extra cinnamon no longer stopped by. Online, someone had left a 2-star review. Too many cameras lately. CEO drama doesn't mix with good coffee. She didn't flinch when she read it, but it settled deep. Meanwhile, across town, inside the boardroom of Whitmore Enterprises, the temperature had shifted. Daniel stood before a half circle of foundation members, their chairs in quiet formation. The screen behind him showed the revised plan gala at Maple and Pine, limited press, open attendance to neighborhood families, and program participants. Margaret Whitmore sat with her hands folded, a pearl pin at her lapel, and not a trace of warmth on her face. "You're abandoning a sponsor-backed location for a cafe?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but the steel underneath was clear. "You understand this invites questions about your leadership priorities." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Then let them ask." "Daniel, we're not doing this for headlines," he said. "We say community matters. It's time to prove that." Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't speak again. She simply reached for her phone, stood, and left the room without a word. Back at the cafe, Emily stood near the doorway to the manager's office, heart thudding low and slow. She had debated all morning whether to step in, just a short conversation, maybe a few words about rescheduling her shift on gala night. When Ms. Gardner, the cafe owner, emerged, Emily opened her mouth, but nothing came. The older woman looked at her, eyes softer than expected. "You've always shown up when it was hardest," she said. "So if this is hard, then you show up again. Not for him. For you." Emily nodded, unsure if she agreed or just didn't know how to disagree. She stayed through the lunch rush. That evening, after Noah's homework and teeth brushing and bedtime stories were done, she curled on the couch, phone glowing in her hand. Daniel's message was still there, unread in the app, but already engraved in her thoughts. "I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want, but if you come stand anywhere, I'll find you." Simple, unassuming, not a plea, but a place offered. She stared at it longer than she meant to. Then came Noah's voice behind her. "Mom." He stood in his pajamas, one hand behind his back. "Can I show you something?" She nodded. He stepped forward, holding up a little suit, navy blue, with a crooked little tie clipped to the collar. "For the gala," he said, "if I'm allowed." Emily stared at it, then at him, then at the floor, where his socks twisted nervously. She reached out and pulled him close. No words were exchanged after that, just the steady sound of his breathing against her shoulder, the weight of the choice forming silently inside her. When she picked up the phone again, the message still hadn't been marked as read, but she didn't close the app. She simply set the phone down gently and turned off the lamp. Maple and Pine had never looked like this before. The soft glow of hanging Edison bulbs bathed the room in a golden hush, while rows of children's paintings lined the exposed brick walls. Paper stars hung from invisible threads above the heads of donors and volunteers. Trays of hors d'oeuvres floated between quiet conversations, and the usual chatter of the cafe had transformed into something slower, more reverent. Daniel stood near the front, no longer a CEO in title or posture. His jacket was off, his tie loosened. He welcomed people with sleeves rolled and hands outstretched, not for shaking, but for grounding. Emily watched from the far end of the room. She wore a navy blue dress, simple, but dignified. One she hadn't pulled from the back of her closet in years. Her hair was pinned up in the same way she used to wear it for college critiques, back when she still believed art could save something. Noah stood beside her, vest slightly crooked, eyes wide with the thrill of being allowed out past his bedtime. He held onto her hand tighter than usual, but not out of fear. It was the kind of grip kids give when they know something matters. Daniel took the microphone. No lights, no fanfare, just his voice and a brief stillness. When we talk about community, he said, we often forget that it starts small. One person listening, one child seen, one moment not missed. Emily felt the weight of it without trying to interpret it. Guests began sharing their stories. A teacher from Tacoma thanked the foundation for funding after-school art. A single mother recounted how her son's speech therapy sessions had helped him say thank you for the first time. The room leaned in for every word. Then came the turn of a group of children meant to share their drawings. A staff member handed the mic to a line of eager little voices, names rehearsed, lines practiced. But somehow, amid the shuffle, it landed in Noah's hands. He wasn't supposed to be part of the program, but he stood straight, swallowed once, looked at Daniel. My name is Noah, he began, voice cracking a little. And I want to thank Mr. Daniel, because he's really nice, and he kind of looks like my dad. The room went still. Emily didn't breathe. Noah kept going. Actually, I think he is my dad. My mom never said that, but I just think he is. There was no sound but the whir of a nearby camera lens. From the other side of the room, a figure rose. Margaret Whitmore, in a tailored forest green coat, her lips a thin line. She stepped forward, chin high. That child is mistaken, she said, measured and calm. There's no truth to that. Daniel didn't turn to her. He stepped off the platform, crossed the room with slow, even steps, bent down so he was eye level with Noah. And if that's true, he said softly, then I'm the luckiest man here tonight. Gasps scattered like birds startled into flight. Emily's legs nearly gave, but she didn't move, couldn't. Her eyes locked on Daniel, not for his words, but for what he didn't do. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny. Noah looked up at him like he'd seen that moment in a dream before. And then Daniel turned to the crowd, not to justify, not to explain, but to stand there, quiet, still, as if finally ready to let whatever truth existed speak louder than reputation. Outside, headlights flickered. A news van pulled in. Reporters gathered, lenses rising like questions no one had scripted for. Inside. Emily remained by the counter. Her coffee-stained apron hung behind the register, but she wasn't just a waitress tonight. She was the woman holding her son steady. While the world tried to tilt, she didn't step forward, she didn't smile, but she didn't look away, either. By morning, Noah Rivera wasn't just a name. It was a headline. It was a search term. It was a story so perfectly shaped for public hunger that no one stopped to ask who it belonged to. Boy thanks CEO for looking like his dad, then says he is. Cafe confession, sparks legacy scandal. Emily didn't sleep that night. The first flash of camera light outside Maple and Pine came before dawn. By 8 a.m., detailed news vans lined the curb like a parade waiting for cue. A stranger in a suit tried to walk inside, asking for a comment off the record. She told him there was no such thing anymore. A local talk show sent a polished anchor to ask if she'd like to set the record straight. But it was Noah who felt the weight. At school, 3 older boys had pointed at him during lunch and mimicked crying. Maybe your mom wants free stuff too. One said. Emily had expected gossip. She hadn't expected cruelty so fast, so sharp. That night, she posted a photo from a dusty box under her bed. It was simple, a Polaroid, faded at the edges, taken under the big oak tree at Washington State. Daniel was 19, so was she. Their fingers laced together, a time before foundation boards, before cafe aprons, before the silence. Her caption was one line. We were once on the same side. The post wasn't a defense. It wasn't an accusation, but it cracked open something. Across the city, Daniel read it in the middle of a tense boardroom meeting. One executive cleared her throat. Another pushed forward a folder. We need an answer. Daniel, said Harold Green, longtime member of the foundation, is the boy yours? Daniel didn't blink. I don't need a test. I just need to be allowed to answer for myself. He stood before the folder, even opened. An hour later, he stood outside a modest brick apartment building in West Seattle. The nameplate on the buzzer was hand-scribbled. The hallway smelled of old pine cleaner and someone's burnt toast. Emily opened the door without surprise. Noah was in his room. The walls were lined with drawings, some of rockets, some of animals. One showed 3 stick figures holding hands, labeled me plus mom plus in green crayon. Daniel took it in quietly. On a side table lay a cut-up shirt, his old college button-down now a makeshift cape for a cardboard robot. You kept it? He asked softly. Emily folded her arms. It became useful. They sat on the couch. She didn't offer tea. He didn't ask for any. I need to know, Emily said. Why you disappeared, not what happened after, just why you didn't come back. Daniel leaned forward, hands clasped. My father died suddenly. My mother flew in that night. She told me I had to leave school, take his place. I left a note at your dorm before catching the red-eye. Emily's face didn't move. I never saw a note. I called, repeatedly. He continued, but your number, it didn't work. I thought, he paused. I thought maybe you'd chosen something else. She finally looked at him, full on. I didn't get any calls, any letters. The only visit I got was from your mother. Daniel's breath slowed. What did she say that I should have enough pride not to chase something I didn't belong to? Emily's voice was steady, but the memory tasted like metal. He sat back, silence pulling the room taut. She knew. Emily nodded. And she made sure you didn't. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. Noah's footsteps padded down the hallway. He peeked around the corner but didn't interrupt, just lingered, watching. I'm not angry anymore, Emily said finally, but I am tired of being made invisible. For him, for me. Daniel looked at her, really looked, the way people do when shame has no place to hide. I want to do this right. No PR team, no statement, just truth. Outside, the buzz of news still hummed. Inside, Emily tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said nothing. The next morning, Daniel scheduled a meeting with Raymond Burke, the only man who had managed his father's estate after his death, the one with access to every old address, every university letter, every forwarded call that might explain how 2 decades had vanished like they were meant to. The elevator doors creaked open on the 5th floor of Whitmore Archives, a floor few had reason to visit in over a decade. The air smelled of old paper and varnished oak. Daniel stepped out, his shoulders squared, though his eyes gave away the tight coil inside him. Frederick Lorne, the former operations manager and one of the few who'd remained loyal to the late Mr. Whitmore, waited by the archive room with a master key. I kept these out of the digitized system, he said, unlocking a tall steel cabinet. Some things were always meant to be buried. They started with the 2012 folders, labeled in Margaret's neat, meticulous hand. Daniel sifted through letters, copies of billing statements, university notices. Then, tucked behind a mislabeled envelope, a small manila folder fell forward. It wasn't filed, it was wedged. He opened it, 7 letters, all addressed to Emily Rivera. The first was barely a paragraph, a rushed, jagged scrawl Emily Dad passed. I'm flying back tonight. I'll be back as soon as I can. Wait for me. His handwriting, college raw, still wearing the weight of grief and urgency. The second mentioned calling from Boston, asking why she hadn't picked up. The third, Daniel stopped breathing. It was a printout of a hospital appointment for prenatal intake, the scheduled time and date. But this version had been scribbled through in red ink, replaced with another letter signed by Margaret Whitmore, declining the appointment on Daniel's behalf. Beneath the letters was a small sheet, torn from a diary, the kind his mother kept in leather-bound stacks. No date, just a single paragraph. The girl is ungrateful. If she surfaces, Daniel loses everything. His future, his name. I'll take care of it. Daniel folded the page with shaking fingers. His pulse was a drum in his throat. She didn't leave me, he whispered. We were torn apart. Frederick watched him quietly, his eyes tired. I knew something wasn't right when Margaret had that student's contact scrubbed from all records. But back then, it wasn't my place. It is now, Daniel said. He slipped the contents into a folder, tucked it under his arm. This is no longer just about the past. This is about who I choose to be. As he walked out of the archive room, Daniel didn't look back. For once, he didn't feel tethered to the family name behind the door. Across town, in the back room of Maple and Pine. Emily had just finished refilling the sugar jars when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer until she saw the area code. Unfamiliar. Old. The voice on the other end was low and weathered. I'm sorry to bother you, Miss Rivera. My name is Marlene Klein. I was the housekeeper for the Whitmore family for 18 years. Emily's fingers froze midair. I know this is sudden, but I'm leaving Seattle tonight. And before I go, I need to give you something. Something that should have reached you 12 years ago. Emily's lips parted, but no sound came. Please, the woman said, softly. I can meet you at the edge of Green Lake Park. It won't take long. Emily hung up slowly, as if the phone had grown heavy. For a full minute, she stood still in the quiet of the kitchen, the steam from the espresso machine curling behind her like breath from another time, and somewhere on the other side of the city. Daniel stepped out into sunlight with a folder full of truths he could never unlearn. The apartment near Green Lake was smaller than Emily expected, modest, clean, scented faintly of dried lavender and lemon polish. Sunlight pooled across the hardwood floors, casting a soft glow on the lace curtains. Marlene Klein, thin and stooped with time, greeted her with a calm nod. No hugs, no polite small talk, just purpose. Come, she said gently, her voice textured by decades. It's better if you see for yourself. Emily followed her to a corner of the kitchen where a tall tea cabinet stood, scratched and faded around the knobs. The old woman opened it, pulled out a wooden box from behind stacked tins of Earl Grey and chamomile, and placed it on the table like it weighed more than it should. I couldn't burn them, Marlene said, even when she told me to. Inside the box, lined with soft, fraying fabric, were 5 folded letters, edges worn, ink dulled with time. A small metal hair clip lay beside them, paint chipped, but still holding the color of that spring fair where Daniel had bought it, teasing Emily about the crooked way she'd pinned her bangs. But it was the notebook, bound in brittle leather, that stopped Emily cold. Marlene opened it to a page already bookmarked. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid it across the table. Emily read, If the girl insists on keeping the child, we'll take it in, quietly. Daniel mustn't know. He has a legacy to preserve. This doesn't belong to him yet. The words struck not like a slap, but like a slow collapse of something old inside her. Not hatred, not even cruelty, just control, silent, deliberate, devastating. She thought she was doing right, Marlene murmured, almost apologetically, but she never asked what was right for you. Emily didn't speak. She only nodded once, her breath shallow. She looked at the letters, then at the box, then out the window, as if her younger self were still waiting out there, hoping someone would explain the silence. That evening, Daniel knocked on her door. She didn't ask how he knew where to find her. He didn't say anything at first, just stood on the threshold. a stillness in his eyes she hadn't seen before, like a man who'd walked through a storm he hadn't known existed. She handed him the wooden box without a word. They sat on the couch, the lights low, a lamp humming softly in the corner. Daniel opened each letter carefully, not quickly, not with anger, as though touching the past could bruise it further. He read in silence. His jaw was tight, but no tears came, only stillness. After each letter, he folded the page gently, as if he were folding years back into themselves. Finally, he looked up. No one, he said, voice hoarse, should have to wait 12 years for someone to explain why they were erased. Emily turned toward him, her eyes glassy. And no one, she answered softly, should take 12 years to ask. They didn't say anything for a long while. Then Daniel looked down, let his fingers rest on the edge of the box. He didn't look at her when he spoke next. His voice was low, not unsure, just careful. "Can I see Noah tomorrow?" he asked, but not as someone passing by. The morning light was softer than usual, filtered through clouds that hadn't decided whether to break or stay. Emily walked Noah to school in quiet steps, his hand smaller now in hers than she remembered from just last year. The playground gates opened, and children spilled out like scattered leaves, full of energy, unaware of stories playing out in grown-up silence. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, walking briskly yet without rush. He held a small, square box, tied with string, nothing fancy, just brown paper and a handwritten note. For Noah, from someone who'd like to be part of your story. He didn't call out or wave. He simply walked to the bench outside the fence, sat down, opened the box, and took out a cookie. Noah hesitated by the steps. Emily crouched down beside him. "It's okay," she said quietly. "You don't have to say anything." But the boy didn't move toward the classroom. Instead, he took 2 steps toward the fence, then 2 more. When Daniel noticed, he smiled, but didn't stand. Just broke another cookie and began a made-up story about a bear who forgot how to growl and had to ask ducks for help. Noah laughed just a little, then more. And something unspoken passed between them, like a quiet breeze sliding under a door left slightly ajar. The next day, Daniel called. "There's a plot of land in West Seattle," he said. "Used to be a rec center. It's empty now, forgotten. I want to rebuild it." "With the foundation?" Emily asked. "No," he replied, "just me. But I want you to run it. I'm not an architect. You don't need to be. You already know what makes a space feel safe." She paused, unsure whether that was a compliment or a memory. Over the next weeks, they worked side by side. Community meetings, sketches drawn on napkins, phone calls with suppliers who didn't quite understand why a woman who served lattes now talked about insulation and playground sand. Emily didn't do it for Daniel. Not at first. She did it for the kids who sat too long inside cramped apartments, for mothers who needed somewhere to cry that wasn't a bathroom stall. But slowly, she began to notice the way Daniel looked at each blueprint, not like a man buying something like someone giving it back. Noah designed the logo, a bright sign with crooked lettering that read, "Second Chance, for real people." Opening day came without speeches, no red ribbon, no grand unveiling, just a wall of blank brick waiting for handprints. Daniel knelt beside Noah, helping him smear blue paint across his palm, guiding it to the wall. Then another child came, then another. Adults followed, awkward but smiling. No media interruptions, no press questions, just people, rebuilding something that had once been taken. At the edge of the crowd, a boy tugged on Emily's sleeve. His voice was curious but careful. "Who is she?" he asked, pointing to her. Before she could answer, Noah replied without looking up. "She's my mom," he said, "and Daniel is the rest." The third community meeting wasn't supposed to feel different. Folding chairs were laid out in neat rows. Children drew with crayons in the corner. Neighbors passed around paper cups of wheat coffee. Daniel stood at the front, sleeves rolled and collar slightly askew, answering questions about timelines and playground equipment with a calm that came from weeks of showing up, not from rehearsed speeches. Then it happened. A small voice broke through the steady rhythm of updates and community chatter. "Daddy, look, I drew our house." A 5-year-old boy darted from the play area to the front. His little fingers clutched a crumpled drawing, and he ran straight to Daniel, tugging at his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel froze. So did everyone else. Emily's body stiffened near the back, eyes locking on the child. It wasn't Noah. She didn't know this boy. No one corrected the name. No adult scolded him. The teacher from the temporary shelter stood still, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment breathe. Daniel looked down at the drawing. Red crayon had shaped a simple triangle roof, 2 windows, and stick figures, one with long hair, one tall, both smiling, both holding a child between them. He knelt slowly, eye level with the boy. "That's a beautiful house," he said softly. "Thank you." The child beamed, then, sensing the quiet around him, turned to return to his seat. The teacher gently led him away. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the meeting resumed on paper, at least, but the air was changed. Afterward, while the hall emptied and chairs clattered back into their stacks, Emily approached. "You didn't have to let him call you that," she said quietly, arms crossed more from habit than hostility. "I didn't," Daniel replied. "He just did, and I didn't want to take it from him." She exhaled. Long, quiet. "You're not trying to prove something, are you?" "No," he said, looking at her without flinching. "I just know what matters now, and I'm trying not to run from it." She didn't argue, didn't roll her eyes, just nodded, slow and unsure. But her eyes had shifted, no longer guarded, no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. That night, they stayed late to help clean up. It wasn't planned, just happened, like the last few weeks had, stacking supplies, wiping counters, sweeping the chalk dust that clung to corners like soft regret. Emily stood in the back room, sorting bins of markers, when Daniel entered behind her. She paused, resting her hands on the edge of a shelf. "I used to think being alone made me stronger," she said, still facing away. "But lately, when you're around, I feel like maybe I've just been used to standing in the wind." Daniel didn't speak. He stepped closer, brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. His hand lingered, just for a second. She didn't pull away. He let his hand drop, slowly, deliberately. She didn't move. For a long moment after, she just stood there, silent, still, letting the quiet stay. The article hit just before dawn. Emily woke to the buzz of her phone, thinking it was Daniel, or perhaps something at Noah's school. But the screen lit up with group chats, notifications from old friends, even one message from a barista she barely knew. "Are you okay?" The headline was bold, cruel in its clarity. "Daniel Whitmore, the fallen heir and the child he claims." Below it, subheadings dissected her life with the precision of a scalpel. Mentions of student loan debts, her mother's mental health history, a line about Noah's unverified parentage. All facts no one outside her closest circle could know. She didn't cry. Not yet. She read every word with that particular stillness people have when something pierces too deep, too fast. She already knew where it came from. That night, she asked Rachel to meet. Same booth, same bar where they once made promises, under dim light and half-priced wine. Rachel arrived late. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes didn't hold the usual sharpness. They looked tired. Emily placed her phone on the table, screen turned down. "You leaked it." Rachel didn't flinch. She just took a slow sip of wine, then said quietly, "Someone was going to. I just made sure it wasn't spun out of control." Emily blinked. "So you weaponized my life to soften the damage I gave you a chance to see how it feels." Rachel replied, the words taut, being the girl left behind, being looked through like glass. Emily's voice dropped. "This isn't about me. This is about a child." Rachel looked away. "You're right." Silence fell like ash. Before leaving, Emily stood and said, "He didn't choose me over you. He didn't even know I was still here. But now he does. And if your idea of justice is hurting a kid who never lied, then maybe you were never my friend." She didn't wait for a reply. Meanwhile, at Whitmore headquarters, the boardroom pulsed with urgency. 12 chairs, polished mahogany, cold water in glass tumblers that no one touched. Margaret sat at the head of the table, composed in the way only years of discipline could teach. Her proposal was brief, clinical. "We request Daniel's temporary resignation from the CEO role, effective immediately, to avoid further reputational damage to the family and the foundation." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply picked up the packet of documents in front of him, his entire legacy, and closed it with quiet finality. "I've built this company beside you. I've served its mission. But if staying means silencing the most honest thing that's happened to me in years, then I won't stay." Murmurs rippled. Margaret didn't speak. Daniel stood, adjusting his sleeves like he had somewhere to be. "You can keep the company. I'll keep my name." He paused at the door, eyes scanning each face. "And for the record, I'm not stepping down because I made a mistake. I'm stepping away because being a father is more important than being a CEO. At least to me." The door clicked shut behind him. Margaret stayed seated, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She didn't follow. She didn't call him back. She just stared straight ahead, like something in her had been quietly erased. The sun hung gentle over West Seattle that morning, not too bright, not too heavy. It cast a warm light across the newly painted bricks of the community center Second Chance, carved into wood above the entrance. The building still smelled faintly of fresh plaster and lemons. It wasn't grand, but it was clean, honest, alive. Guests began arriving, early single mothers, retired veterans, children in two big suits holding paper programs folded 3 times. There were no red carpets, just chalk arrows on the sidewalk, drawn by Noah and the neighborhood kids, guiding everyone inside. Emily stood near the entrance in a white dress that swayed just below the knee. Her hair was pulled back, her hands steady, though her chest was tight. She greeted people with nods and soft smiles, not the kind for show, but the kind people remembered weeks later. Daniel didn't take the stage. He poured tea at the back table, refilled pitchers, held babies for mothers signing forms, and straightened folding chairs after each speech ended. People noticed, but no one said much, not because they didn't care, but because sometimes the right gesture makes silence the better reply. Noah had taken the job of tour guide with full ceremony. He wore his best shirt, one Daniel had picked out at the thrift store, saying it had president energy. He led groups through each room, pointing out the art walls, the snack cabinet, the corner where he got to pick the green tiles. In the main hall, on the tallest brick wall, was the mosaic. Hundreds of tiny shards, some from dishes people had donated, others hand-painted by local kids. At the center was a child with arms stretched high, a son behind them. Beneath, scrawled in wobbly letters, because second chances are how families begin again. Emily stood beside it, running her fingers along one smooth ceramic edge. Daniel approached quietly. He didn't interrupt. He stood shoulder to shoulder with her, then lifted his hand large, steady, a little nicked from hammering panels last week, and placed it beside hers on the wall. Not touching, just close enough. His voice was low. "People keep asking if I regret any of it." She didn't look up, but she listened. "I don't regret loving you, Emily, not once. What I regret is letting other voices speak for me, when all I ever needed was to speak to you." Her eyes didn't fill immediately, but the breath that escaped her lips trembled. She wiped the tears slowly, without shame. Then, just as Daniel turned to give her space, Noah appeared between them, clutching something small in his hand. "Mom said I could give you this now." He said. He handed Daniel a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was his own handwriting. Jagged, unsure from over a decade ago, the first letter he ever wrote Emily, telling her he'd be back soon. A note never sent. On top of it, in colored pencil and crayon, was a child's drawing of three stick figures holding hands under a tree. In a bubble above the smallest figure, it read, "I forgive you if Mom already did." Daniel blinked slowly, the paper trembling in his hands. He knelt to meet Noah's eyes. "That means more than I know how to say." Noah nodded. "Serious. I know." Behind them, people paused. Some wiped their eyes. Others simply stood still, like watching something delicate return to shape. No applause, no speeches, just warmth, quiet, present. The kind that fills a room not with noise, but with healing. Emily looked down at her son, then at Daniel. And for the first time, she didn't feel like someone surviving. She felt like someone beginning again. A year passed, soft but full. Second Chance wasn't just a center anymore. It had branches, now small ones, in Beacon Hill and South Park. Not big, not flashy, but they worked. And the main campus, the one they'd built from dust and memory, had become a landmark of sorts. People came not just for help, they came to belong. That spring afternoon, the main courtyard held its first community photo exhibit. Kids ran between display boards and lemonade stands. Strings of light looped above, catching the early dusk. The old parking lot, once cracked and forgotten, bloomed under their feet, chalk drawings, potted plants, a soft hum of cello from the student corner. Emily walked through the open-air gallery in a linen blouse and canvas shoes. Her eyes lingered on a photo blown up near the entrance. It showed her and Noah mid-laugh, painting the mosaic wall. What she hadn't known, until this photo, was that Daniel was in the background, holding the ladder steady, eyes on her, not the camera. She exhaled quietly. The children's exhibit stretched along the west wing, fingerprints in acrylic, messy brushstrokes of hope. A boy in a checkered shirt tugged her sleeve. "Ms. Emily, is Mr. Daniel not coming today?" She turned, smiled. "He's here." And there he was, standing near the juice table, dressed in jeans and a white t-shirt with a smudged sticker that read, "Volunteer, no title needed." His hands held a stack of paper cups. No spotlight, no crowd, just him, steady as always. She walked toward him, no rush. Daniel saw her coming and gently set the cups aside. He pulled something from his pocket, a tiny gray box, plain except for the faint rub of time at the edges. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he opened it between them. Inside, a ring, simple, silver, worn smooth, like something meant to be held, not shown. Behind them, the sea at Alki shimmered under the lights. Years ago, they'd walked that beach barefoot, 17, and believing time was theirs. It wasn't, but this moment was. "I'm not saying, 'I love you,'" he said softly. "I'm saying, I'm staying." Emily didn't cry this time. She just nodded. That was enough. Later. As the event closed, people gathered around the east wall. A surprise mural had appeared there, drawn in secret by the kids, with help from one unnamed adult. It showed three figures holding hands beneath a wide sky. A woman with a paintbrush in her hair, a man with a rolled-up sleeve, a boy between them, arms outstretched, above their heads, painted in bold but wobbly script. "We don't need to be the same, just need to look the same way." Emily stood beside Daniel, reading the words. Her hand found his. People didn't cheer, no one clapped, but a few stood a little straighter. Some held their breath, not knowing why, because what they saw wasn't just a picture, it was a beginning. The sun hit the mosaic wall just right that morning, casting soft colors across the sidewalk, where kids now ran without glancing back. No ceremony, no declarations, just steady hands building something that stayed. Maybe some wounds don't close the way we expect. Maybe they stay open just enough to remind us what mattered. But if someone is still there, still listening, still trying, then maybe that's enough. Not to fix the past, just to keep walking beside it.